Hello and welcome to the CAPE podcast. CAPE standing for the Child Abuse Prevention and Education Podcast. My name is Kristi McVie and I am an ex-West Australian police officer who spent 10 years with the police where I was trained as a specialist child interviewer and a child abuse detective. This podcast is all about sharing what I learnt, saw and knew whilst investigating child sexual abuse in the police force. It is also about sharing the knowledge that I gained in that time that helped me with my own parenting of my then 2-year-old daughter. My mission is to help share my knowledge and to help you in your role as parents to keep your kids safe, along with guest experts in the field of child abuse prevention and education, both in person and online. Thank you so much for joining in on the fight to prevent child sexual abuse. Your kids will thank you for it. Hello and welcome back to the Operation CAPE podcast. I keep shortening it. Maybe I should change the name of the podcast because I keep saying the CAPE podcast, but it's actually the Operation CAPE podcast, the Child Abuse Prevention and Education podcast. I'm here today with Imogen, who is an advocate and survivor of child sexual abuse, who has a really fascinating story that she has to tell. I just want to first, before I get started with the full interview, is that to let you know there's a trigger warning for this episode. For most episodes that we do in the Operation CAPE podcast, there's a trigger warning, but for this one, Imogen's going to be telling her story of survival through her child sexual abuse. And I just wanted to make sure that people realize we're talking about things that are hard to listen to, but very, very important to know about. So Imogen and I met through, well, Imogen was following me on TikTok and we got talking, and here we are because Imogen's been a fighter and she's been fighting for her own, advocating for herself, but now wants to advocate for other victims and survivors. So thank you very much, Imogen, for being here today.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
So Imogen, I'll hand the mic over to you. How did this all, well, you start wherever you feel ready and comfortable to start.
Okay, so how did this all come about? I guess, yeah, I've been watching your TikToks for some time, and I've been wanting to get my story out there. Not only just because I want to tell my story, but I also want to use my story to help educate people, especially parents, on child sexual abuse and just how difficult the situation can be to get out from. Like with my story, it took years for me to actually get out of the situation when a lot of people knew about it. So I was failed on many different levels from lots of different people.
Well, let's start with regards to your perpetrator was your stepfather, is that right?
Yes, he was. So
when did he come into your life?
I was about 3 years old.
Yeah.
So 3 years old, my mum and him got together, but interestingly enough, the day I was born, he was like friends with the family. He wanted to come and meet me and meet the baby, which now looking back, for a 17-year-old boy, I don't really think that's normal. So, he, even though my mum was with my father, tried to get to know my mum over that period of time. And as soon as my mum and dad separated, they were together very quick. So I don't think that was a coincidence or an accident. I believe that he had targeted me from birth. Yeah.
Wow. Just interesting point there. So your mum was quite young when she had you, is that right?
Yeah, she was only 19.
Yep.
And the relationship between my mum and dad was not a good one. So I do believe that he saw her as a vulnerable person and targeted her.
Yeah.
Well, and he targeted me as well. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So he was in your life from 3 years old, and how did that all pan out? Like, what happened? Was he a good stepdad, or was he?
Yeah. So this is where it gets complicated. So if I wasn't sexually abused by him, he would have been a great stepfather.
Yeah.
And that's what made it so hard to report and to get away. I was very conflicted because like I knew what he was doing was wrong,
Mm.
but at the same time, I had this brand new family. His family took me in. It was, amazing, wonderful. And I knew that, or I thought that reporting would mean I had to give up that whole relationship with his family,
Yeah.
because they didn't use terms like step or anything like that.
It
I
was
was
just
just their
family.
family.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I should add, as soon as I was 3 years old and he came into my life, within a matter of a few months, he had upped and moved me, my mum, and him away to Brisbane. And we're from like a rural town in far north Queensland. And so he took us away basically. And I believe that was a way to isolate us.
Yeah, that sounds very that's like groomer 101, or like that's definitely a tactic that people use to isolate victims. So yeah, that sounds very
Yeah, yeah,
true.
yeah.
Well, not that's not the right word. That sounds very like what I've seen in other cases. So yeah, so he's moved you away and gotten you away from your
Yeah,
support
yeah.
network. So then you guys have moved away to Brisbane, and then so from the news article that I read, he started abusing you from about 5. Is that right?
Yeah, well, that's my first memory. So obviously, I
Yeah.
can't really remember anything between the ages of 3 to 5,
Yeah.
but possibly the probability is pretty high. But my first memory that I was able to, report on was from 5 years old.
Yeah, right. So talk about
Yeah.
your journey in reporting like all of this to police and getting some justice, because you've obviously had years and years of abuse, which you talk about. It took a lot to get away from. Talk about that with us so that we can understand what you
Yeah.
had to go through.
Yeah. So basically, from the ages of 5 to 12, I did not say anything to anyone. I was so ashamed, and it was a really shameful thing for me. And also, like, I couldn't say the words like penis or vagina. I wasn't raised at all. Like, they were so embarrassing for me. Like, there was no
Yeah.
way that I could speak about those issues. So when I was 12, I told my best friend at the time, um, just had a little breakdown, told my friend, who told her mum, and
Yeah.
then child safety got involved. Um, Child safety knew that I was being abused basically, but didn't really do anything about it. They just said he can't live in the home anymore, and that's it. They didn't do any follow up. Um, they have a lot to answer for. They didn't follow up my family at all, and within a month of child safety coming into the picture and telling my mom, and saying he couldn't live with us anymore, he was straight back living in our house. And it was just a factor of my mom saying he's sorry and he won't do it again, but
Mm.
basically don't tell anyone that he's living here. So that was awful in itself. And I had to carry that secret until I was 15, and that's when I just couldn't take it anymore. He obviously did continue to abuse me, but he just got sneakier about it. He didn't stop, and I was really suffering at the time. My grades were suffering. I was barely going to school. Um, and I said he needs to leave the house. He leaves the house, or I'm leaving. And that's when he left for good, and we moved away, back up to where we're from, and that was how we really escaped the situation. And then from the ages of 15 to oh, actually no, when I was 16, I did approach the child protection unit, like the police unit in Brisbane, and told them what had happened, but I just wasn't ready to report then. I didn't have a support system. My mum wasn't supportive. She didn't want me to report. She was really embarrassed by it. She held a lot of shame around it as well. And she basically begged me not to. And I just decided I wasn't ready. and yeah, didn't do anything about it at the time.
Yeah.
Then when I was 21, I found out that he had remarried and he had children. He had 3 daughters. So
Oh,
that was very triggering for me at that time, because I'd also had a child by then, and my child and his child had the same birth date. So, every time I would look at my child, I would think, oh, there's this little girl the same age that is with this with this man. So I did try to press charges again at that time, and I had a very not so great experience with the police then.
yeah.
They basically wanted to take my statement over the phone, and then they wouldn't even take my statement. They told me not to bother, that
Wow.
basically nothing would come of it, and why put myself through that trauma. So
Wow.
that was, yeah, that was
That's
very
really,
disappointing.
that's hugely disappointing.
Yeah, yeah. And but in the end, it did help my case, because there was this paper trail of every time I had contacted the police. But it could have happened a lot earlier. And even when I ended up contacting the police, years after this, I still thought, oh, maybe they're not going to take my statement. But I was
Yeah.
ready to push for it.
Yeah.
But I was so fortunate when I did contact them when I was 28, and I had like, I want to say brilliant experience, but um, given what it was, it's not
Yeah.
really brilliant. Yeah, it was a positive experience. So
It's just hard to hear
um,
as an ex-police officer and a detective, it's hard to hear victims and survivors tell me how badly they've been treated by police. It's this episode's not about me, but I just want you to know that you should never have been pushed away like that. And I have seen detectives and police officers treat victims like that before, and it just, I used to have arguments with them, and it should never have been like that. It should never be like that for any victim, any survivor. Anyone who comes to a police station or talks to an officer and says, I want to report a crime, they should never be treated that way, especially
yeah,
when
definitely.
especially when it comes to child sexual abuse and sexual abuse. Like, victims and survivors should be treated with the utmost respect and support, not treated like this is too hard.
Yeah, yeah, that was definitely the response that I had. That second time that I spoke to them, um, I actually had to think of other ways, like creative ways, like how am I going to keep these children safe? Like, even
Yeah.
though it's not my responsibility for him to not,
No.
for him to offend. Like, that's, if he was going to offend, that's on him. But I still felt this responsibility to his children. So I was contacting child safety. I was like making report. And
Yeah.
I feel very glad child safety took it very seriously, and he wasn't allowed to be around the children unless it was supervised. And that was in place for up until he ended up going to jail. So I'm very thankful for them.
Yeah.
In that second experience with them, that they listened.
Do you think that some part of you was like, well, I was failed by the system and the people that should have protected me, but I'm not going to fail these kids. Like, I'm not going to
Yeah,
let this keep going. It's not okay.
yeah, definitely. And I was like, I'm going to be the cycle breaker. I'm
Yeah.
going to make sure this stops. So I told everybody in his family too, which
Yeah.
I never
Wow.
wanted to do, because I felt like it would destroy them. And it was a big thing for them. Luckily, most of his family members were very supportive, and actually his father was one of the, like, my main supporters.
Mm.
And
Wow. They must have
yeah,
known. They must have known deep down that he was that way, like that he would do that, or he was possible capable of doing that.
yeah, possibly. There was a lot of denial with a few family members, but
Yeah.
once his dad and his sister came to terms with it, like, they have been there the whole way through.
That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah,
That's how it should be, right? That should, when a child or a young person comes forward and says, this person, regardless of who it is, this person is hurting me, is abusing me, then a family should go, okay, how do we keep you safe? How do we help you? How do we support you? I understand, and I want to circle back to your mum, right? So your mum was obviously quite young. She was a young parent. She was obviously very reliant on your stepdad. Would that be the right word?
Yeah, completely reliant.
And do you think he
She,
groomed
yeah,
her? Do you think he groomed
yeah,
her and created that, like, that need to, for him
yeah,
to keep her safe on, like, I find when in these cases, especially with single parents, that they create this like vacuum or like this bubble for the mum, basically protect the mum and make her sort of brainwashed, or I don't know what the words are, but they keep them safe in this bubble, away from, isolated from people, so that they can't leave and they can't do anything. And even when they do find out, like your mum, they
yeah,
are so worried about losing that.
yeah, definitely. You know, she has a lot to answer for as well, and it's been a rocky relationship with her. We weren't in contact for a very long time. It's only been recently that we've started to, you know, rebuild any form of relationship.
Yeah.
Because, in a way, yes, she was groomed, but to me, it's no excuse
No, she was
to
an
not
adult.
protect your child. Exactly. And, I feel like I took on most of the adult role of being like,
Yes.
this is not okay. We need to report. We need to get away.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's been my role, I guess, uh, in the dynamics there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can relate.
Um,
I can hugely relate to that. Yeah, sometimes I don't know. I am a parent, you're a parent. When we're thinking about this stuff, I because I became the parental role in my family very early on. And I often reflect on, roles and responsibilities of parents. And I
mm,
feel that, when our parents like let us down like they do, they have forgotten their roles and responsibilities, and that their roles and responsibilities are to protect us, keep us safe, feed us, give us love. Their responsibility isn't to make us happy and make us find us jobs or find us all of these things, but they've got a small amount of responsibilities, and that's what we as parents need to do, right? Our responsibility. I'm
yeah,
sure
exactly.
I'm sure you with your own children are sitting in the back and going, I will never let this happen to my kids. I will never let them if my child told me this, I would protect them to the nth degree. Like, I would go to the ends of the earth to protect them. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, that's exactly, how I feel. And yeah, I'm even, I wouldn't say paranoid, but even for me, like I am divorced and I have not repartnered, and people always ask me why, and I just
Yeah.
for me, but personally, it's not worth. My children are going to be adults one day,
Yeah.
or older. What's the rush? Just with my experience, I don't want to ever be bringing anybody into the house.
Yeah.
Just given the statistics, and uh, for me, it's not worth it. I'm not saying that a single parent shouldn't do that, or repartner at all. That's not what I'm saying. But yeah, just for me, I decided that that's something that I'm not
You don't.
interested in.
Yeah, and I don't blame you. And I hear that from a lot of survivors with children, that they just are like not willing to risk it, not willing to try, and it's not worth it. And I admire anyone who feels that way or does that for their own children. So when you at 28, when you reported and you finally went through the process of getting him charged and going through that process, and in the newspaper article I read from 2020, he only got 5 years and was able to get parole after 20 months. Was that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah,
I mean, the amount of abuse that you endured, 5 years is not a lot, is it?
yeah, it wasn't a lot, and even in court on that day, the judge wasn't overly impressed with that either, and but that's the decision that they came to with sentencing. Um, just based on other cases. I was very disappointed. And I was only told the day before as well what the sentence was going to be, and I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to go to court. Um, I just couldn't believe it. And then I also was asking about, well, how long is he going to be on the sex offenders registry? And I was told 5 years. So I was like, so he's going to potentially serve 5 years in jail and then get out and then not even be a registered sex offender. And was told, yes, pretty much.
Well, actually,
You
I can correct you there, because
Yeah.
their time on the sex offender register doesn't start until they leave prison. So he would have been on there. But I was under in Western Australia, a sex offender, when they're released for prison, goes on it for 10 years, first offence. Second offence, if they're found again, they go on there for life. So I'm not sure what's different about Queensland, because I haven't looked up your legislation, but I would have thought that it was pretty similar. So I'm surprised that it's 5 years, but yeah, he would still be on the sex offender register today, because he would have got out when, I can't believe
He
it's
got
20.
out in January. He got out in January. He didn't get parole. He was in jail for a little bit longer.
Thank God for that, but still not enough. Not enough.
Still not. Yeah.
So in regards to all of this processing, you told me before we started that, you had to actually give up your anonymity. And I said that word finally. You gave up your you gave up your anonymity to be able to have his name published in the news, in papers, and to have him identified. Because and listeners might not know this, but when a child abuse victim is related or semi-related to the offender, the news is not allowed to report the person's name. If they're not related, then they can report it. But when they're related or a member of a family, they can't identify the perpetrator or the offender, because it could identify the victim. So what did you have to do to be able to share that information?
So on the day in court, like on when he got sentenced, there was a reporter in the courtroom, and she was the only one. And I kind of approached her and asked her what she had planned to do with the story, and she told me, she wouldn't be able to publish any names, but yeah, she was going to report on it, and asked me if I was interested in contributing to the story. And I said, definitely. And I asked, what do I need to do to get him identified? And she just said, you'll have to, sign this piece of paper that you are okay with his identity being released, because there is that risk that it will identify you. Like, we're not going to publish your name, but there is that risk that it will identify you. And I was more than happy to do that. And after the court, what would you call it, like the sentencing, we went into a private room in the courtroom, and we sat down for about an hour, and I spoke about her experience, and she asked me what I was okay with getting published and what I wasn't okay with. She also read my victim impact statement.
Yeah,
in full, and she just got little bits out of it, and she said, are you okay with this bit being published? And I'd agree. And so I felt like I had a lot of control over the situation. And basically, yeah, that's how that came about.
Do you feel do you feel that being able to have report on it and have his name out there in the public has helped with your healing process? Because I'd imagine having that as public record, and him, you just have to Google his name now, and his name's going to come up as being a convicted child sex offender. That must be have some relief attached to it, I'd imagine.
Definitely, especially because of the sentence that he got.
Yeah,
I wasn't happy with that, so I thought, I want this to follow him. It just says it's followed me for my life. Like, it should also follow him. He shouldn't be able to get away with it and go on to live his life as normal. There has to be some more repercussions.
for sure.
Yeah.
Have you ever, so you just said that you've obviously your mum didn't support you. She wasn't protecting you or protective. She was obviously, looking after her own interests by not doing anything about the abuse when she found out about it. have you had any conversations with her, or have you just let that go because you know that she's not capable of having that?
I have just decided to let it go.
Yeah.
For me, with everything that could have been said has been said.
Yeah.
When the lead up to us having me going no contact with her, it's been said.
Yeah.
And I've just had to make that decision of, do I want her in my life? And yes, to a certain extent I do, but she is definitely not, a mother, if that
Yes.
makes sense. It's just,
A
I'm in
person.
control.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, she's had a bit of contact with her grandchildren, and
Yeah.
I can't just take that away from my children.
Yeah.
They already have a relationship with her, so
Yeah, I think also as long as she respects the boundaries you put in place, like I think familial relationships are really difficult because we've been taught that we should respect our elders, we should, blood's thicker than water, we should do this and this, we should listen to our elders, we shouldn't just cut our families off. But I think, and I'm sure you'll agree, you've done it. If they're unhealthy, unsafe, and they don't care, that they're only looking after their best interests, then they are not, technically they are not the family that we want around our kids, right?
yeah,
So
exactly.
if they make some changes, and if they help, and if they are willing to toe the line, so to speak, then that's when I think it's okay to let them back into your child's lives. But I wouldn't be trusting them with their safety, and I wouldn't be trusting them with, like the big stuff. But yeah,
Exactly.
I can understand,
Yeah.
because I didn't grow up with child sexual abuse, but I grew up with emotional and psychological and drug abuse and abuse, alcohol abuse and all of that. And I have a relationship with my own mother now, but I didn't as a child. And
Yeah.
it's only because she's made changes in her life. She's grown and she's matured and she's, remorseful. So like, I have her in my life, and I'm grateful for that now, and I do that for myself as well as my daughter.
That's a personal decision that everybody has to make. And a few years ago, I never thought that I'd talk to her again.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's not just something that I don't think anyone would just make a decision like that lightly.
Mm. Hey, I wanted to know, so at 12 years old, you reported it to a friend, they reported it to their mum, and it got reported to child protection. And so there was,
Yeah.
back then, I mean, what year were we talking back then? In
Well,
the 2000s, 90s? When were we talking?
I don't know if you think how old I would have been. Yeah, it would have been the 2000s, early 2000s.
Right. So you've gone, so basically, did you ever get interviewed back then by police? Did you ever, any of that happen?
So what happened was I was in class one day, and the principal called my name over the intercom and
Yeah.
said I need to come to the office. I was terrified. I was like, what have I done?
Oh,
You
no.
know, and then so I started walking up to the office. The principal just looked very sad. I thought someone in my family had died.
Yeah.
Like, that was the vibe I was getting. And they said, you have to come to the office. I was walked into a room, and there was two police officers, I think two child safety officers, the female principal, and they asked me to sit down and ask me, do I know what this is about and why are they here? And I was terrified and I was so embarrassed. Um, I don't know if that's how they do things these days, but I asked everyone to leave basically, and said, like, at 12 years old, I said, everyone that doesn't need to really be here, could you leave? And so one police officer left, and one of the child safety officers left, and the principal. And I was sat down and, yeah, interviewed, but I was so scared. I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. I didn't disclose. But in my records that I got many years later, it was all like, yeah, saying that they know that I've been abused. They could tell by my body language, that they were very certain, and but I wasn't willing to disclose at that point. They also said that they would follow up and see if I would disclose later. But yeah, that never happened.
You just got lost in the system.
Yeah, basically. But I was very coached anyway.
Yeah,
From
tell
that
us
point
about
on.
that, because I read in the article that you had been you were made to rehearse lines. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so I was coached a lot by my mum and my stepdad about what to say if child safety came back. If he was living in the house, what to say, if I was ever asked by anyone else. And, I was taught to make eye contact. Um, I'm trying to think, yeah, eye contact and engaging. Basically was taught how to engage. And fortunately, yeah, unfortunately, that behavior has followed me through my whole life. People, I've had doctors say like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like making eye contact and being like, "Yeah, I'm absolutely fine."
Yeah.
And yeah, just learned to mask, and that's something that I still do to this day. That's the one thing that I actively have to work on. But I'm very lucky that my doctor and my psychologist know to take everything I say at face value.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
even if I'm making eye contact and acting happy, but I say I'm really sad, they know to take that seriously, that I'm sad. So that's just one of the examples of, yeah, I was really coached and I was really groomed.
What did the grooming look like, other than the obviously the coaching to not talk to other adults or parents or anyone? But what did
Yeah,
the coaching, like, was there grooming happening between 5 and 12 when all of that abuse originally was started before you actually disclosed?
yeah, 100%. I was made to feel very special. I was just told constantly like I'm intelligent, I'm amazing. Like, um, I had no boundaries placed on me. I could do whatever I wanted. I was given money. My friends thought, wow, this is fantastic. Like, her house is so cool. But in reality, not so much. And that made it very hard to report is I don't want to give up that money. I don't want to give up this lifestyle. And my mum would be like, we can't afford it. If he leaves the house, we can't afford to live, which wasn't true at all. She had a very good job. I think he had just groomed her into thinking that
Needing him.
she couldn't do it on her own.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Also, just to not change the subject, but to add more onto that grooming aspect is I did keep a lot of diaries and journals my whole life. So when I was a child, I had seen on TV that, you should like remember as much detail as possible. I
Yeah,
think
right.
I got that off. I think I got that off, SVU. And it really stuck with me because I'm like, one day I'm going to send this man to jail. So I would write these diaries, and like every time I was abused, I would write down, just a cover story. Like, I went to the movies today and this is what I wore, or, just something that would jog my memory of that time. And
Really?
I did that up until I was about 15. So I have these journals with these logs of all the abuse, and that really came in handy when I was pressing charges. Um, but then when I was 15 and onwards, when he'd left the house, I actually started journaling my experience. And it's interesting because I was reading them the other day, and my first journal entry was like saying he's been gone out of the house for 2 days. I feel so sad. I'm so worried for him. I'm worried he's going to kill himself. He doesn't have us. He's going to be so lonely. And I felt a lot of guilt, and I was really struggling with that. So I just couldn't believe, like, to the extent that I was groomed. And what's that syndrome almost where you like start
Stockholm
to,
syndrome.
it was almost like that. Like, I just couldn't bear the fact that, he was messaging or not calling my mum at the time saying he was sleeping in his car. So, I was holding on to a lot of that and thinking it was my fault. And,
Mm.
as the diary entries go on, obviously it changes, and you see over the years me really starting to change and being like, no, this was not okay. But just the extent of what he went to try to get back into our lives was insane. Like one day after we had, he had been kicked out of the house, he showed up and my mum wasn't home, and he had cut his whole body, like his arms, his torso, his legs, and
Wow.
he was trying to say, oh, tell your mum to let me back in the house. Like, look how much I'm suffering. And I remember at that point, I just was so scared and so freaked out. But luckily he still didn't come back into the house to live with us. But yeah, it's pretty telling of how much he was trying to get back in by
Manipulating you.
manipulating us. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. And
So
couple of the things in that, what you just said about the diaries. When did you start writing the diaries?
so from about 8 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, my first ones are from eight. So there's a lot. I have a lot of diaries, and yeah, the police loved it when I ended up pressing charges when I was 28, because it was all admitted into evidence. Um, but
Wow.
yeah, I don't know. I was just a clever child, I think, and that's what I
You
decided to do.
were severely like I'm, as an investigator, like that would have been like the most amazing piece of evidence, because if you started basically you know taking writing your accounts down, and how smart were you to try and hide a code? You created a code so that you could keep it from him if he ever looked at it, or he wouldn't identify what you were actually doing.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the
Wow.
whole point. And I kept those journals with me. Like, oh, we all also were moved around a lot. Like, we never stayed in one house for very long. It was always,
Mm,
covering his tracks. So those journals came with me. They were always kept in like a special bag. And
wow.
I just used to say, I just love journaling. I'm gonna write a book one day. That was my kind of cover story for the journals.
Oh my God. That was my thought when you were telling the story. Like, you should write a book with those journals. Like, you could easily create
Yeah,
an amazing, well, not an amazing book. None of this is, I don't wish child sexual abuse on anyone, but the forethought, the pre-planning, the intelligence, like, yeah, just amazing. I'm just
yeah,
I'm just so grateful that you got that you finally got to tell your story, and you're still telling your story to be able to help others.
yeah. And also, I should add, whenever we moved houses, I would write it down, because when you're reporting and they would say, "What house did you live in then?" And as a child, you can't. It all kind of
Remember.
meshes into one. But I
Yeah.
was able to say, "I lived in this house," and
Wow.
yeah, the detective that I had was just amazed by it. She's like, "Can we have these journals, please?" And I'm like, "Yeah,
And they gave
that's
them back to you,
fine."
obviously, because
They
once it's
did.
all said and done, you can get them back. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's just like next level. If I had have ever had a victim that did that, I would have been like absolutely beside myself, excited for the case, because these
yeah,
cases are hard. These are hard cases to investigate when if you don't have those details. They make it a bit more of a puzzle piece. You got to find all the investigations are like puzzles, right? You got to find all the pieces and slot them in together, and you basically gave them the picture of the puzzle so that they could put the puzzle pieces together. Whereas generally when we're dealing with like the amount of abuse that you endured, it takes a lot more energy and a lot more effort to get to that point where you can put the pieces together.
yeah, yeah. And I think, like, even from the age of 15, when I stopped using code and actually started writing about it as well, that was all used, because it was like this chronological, like, history almost of when he left. And
Oh, wow.
you know from moving and moving away, and me really writing about it.
Wow.
Everything was dated. It was hard for me though to give over the ones that were from 15 onwards, because
Yeah.
I did know that he would get access to that potentially. Because he has the right to see the evidence, and that was hard. Just knowing that,
He would
I
see
had
all
to
of the
really think
evidence.
about yeah, I had to think about that, and I did decide to give it over in the end. Bar one journal, I said no, that was the last one that I wrote as a teenager, but that was very, very personal, and I just said you can have every other journal but this one.
And that's fair.
And my detective was really understanding. So,
Yeah.
oops,
Okay, so I just wanted, so we've had some conversations in regards to all of this stuff, and you sent me this beautiful email outlining how much of a battle you went through, what you did and stuff. And in there you told me that the defense lawyer, or during the court process, that the defense lawyer was quite underhanded and shady. But I mean, defense lawyers can be very sneaky in that they try and discredit the victim and stuff like that. What was your experience with regards to that?
So I was prepped as well as you can be by the DPP, who um were with me along the whole way, and they did tell me a little bit what to expect, but there's no preparing you for being asked the question. Like, I put it to you that you you don't remember correctly, or that never happened, and you'd be like, no, it did. But just being asked a million different times, like in a different way.
Mm.
Oh, but are you sure? Because you were so young. How do you really know that's your memory? And it's just like gaslighting at its finest. But I really had to remember that this is this man's job. This is
Yeah.
what he's being paid to do, and it was hard, because then when it was decided that he's guilty and going to jail, then he tried to give all these excuses for his offending. So there was they tried to say that he had undiagnosed mental health problems, that he was um undiagnosed bipolar, and that made him offend, which is just offensive to people with mental health issues or bipolar. Like,
Yeah.
that really upset me, because that's not true at all. And they said, oh, but he had a problem, and he was doing cocaine that whole time, and he was offending after he took cocaine. And for me, I was like, oh, I don't think that's true either. But even if he was, that's no excuse.
Yeah.
And then they said, oh, but he was abused as a child, so that's why he's done it. And then again, I was like, well, I've been abused, and I don't abuse children, so I don't accept that either.
Yeah.
Just the way it was like hitting me, you know, um,
Just always making
it was,
excuses. As,
yeah,
as
and
if he
trying to get this
as if he deserves a free kick because of all of that, like as if he deserves to be forgiven and forgotten, like, and let
yeah,
loose into the public when he's a danger to children. It was only
yeah,
a matter of time, if not already, that he would have abused his own children. So, if he hadn't
yeah,
already
yeah,
abused them. So, he's a danger to children. He does not care
yeah.
about his offending. All of that tells me he does not care, and he's not remorseful.
Yeah, and the other thing was, he had written a letter, a sorry letter, that he hadn't tried to give me, before this happened, before going to court. It was like, at court on the day, he asked the judge to give me this letter. And the judge said, the victim is in this courtroom, and I'm absolutely certain that she's not interested in reading your apology letter. So please do not even, um, try to offend her by wanting me to give this to her. Like, if she ever wants it in the future, she can request it, but I'm absolutely not entertaining that.
Yeah.
So I had a very, very good judge as
Yeah.
well.
Wow. Yeah.
Um,
I'm just,
and to add,
yeah. So go.
Oh yeah, no, just to add, his current wife was in the courtroom on the day as well and was, turning around and giving me dirty looks and shaking her head as if she couldn't believe why I was doing this, and acting like I had ruined her life. Uh,
Well,
and
you had
you know,
ruined her impression of this apparently perfect husband and this perfect father that she had in her mind. That's the one thing that I can't get my head around, is when people like to see the world in their own little goggles with their own little ideas and their own little perceptions, and when someone else rips that out from under them, they are not ready to see it, so they are willing to believe whatever they want to believe. And that is why
yeah,
mothers don't protect children. That's why families stick by offenders. That's why, instead of going, hey, you did this and you now need to pay for it, and when you have paid for it, we will think about, and you show us that you care and you show us that you're rehabilitated or you're trying, we might give you another chance. But I just never got that. Even as a detective talking to families, they would be like making excuses and
mm,
enabling and giving them all of these opportunities. She was just not willing to sit in discomfort and believe what was being said.
yeah, exactly. And those are just all the little things that I never expected to happen
Yeah.
when I first went in and reported. Coming back to actually getting to that point of wanting to report, I really had to come to that decision on my own. Like I had a lot of pressure to go back to the police and to report, and it was very stressful. I wasn't ready at the time, and I felt a lot of guilt for not being ready, but I didn't know what to expect. I thought that I would have to walk into the police station and just rattle off a statement. I didn't know that they helped to guide the interview. It was not as bad as I thought. It really wasn't as bad. Like, of course, it was traumatic and I had to sit there and relive it. But I had,
Yes.
detectives from the child protection unit, and I'm so grateful that I did and I didn't just have someone that wasn't trained.
Yes.
Um, yeah, so
I
just
don't think people
coming back
understand,
to that.
it there's so many bad stories out there, and what's beautiful about your story is that you had the bad stories, but you didn't let it stop you. And I'm not saying that it's everyone's journey is to report their abuse. That's their choice,
Mm,
that's their prerogative. That's what you always have to do, what's right for you and what you can live with. At the end of the day, when you close your bed, put your head on your pillow at night, what you can actually live with and what you're comfortable with. But you obviously knew, like, from a very young age, that everything that was going on, you were going to do something about it, because you wouldn't have written those journals otherwise. So
yeah, yeah,
so you were always on this path to this stage. And you sharing your story here on this podcast is only just the beginning of you helping other people heal and go through this process. Before I get to my last question, what do you think would help people in this? Someone listening to this podcast today who went through something similar or has been a victim of abuse, what do you think would help them in understanding what they're about to embark on if they do a report? Is there anything that you can think of that might have helped
yeah,
you? Like, you're talking about how different the process was than what you thought it was going to be, right?
yeah, definitely.
Do you think that there's something there that you could share?
Yeah, so if you're about to embark on the process, I would definitely be trying to get, a detective who was trained in
Yeah.
child protection. They are trained to be able to deal with that, and the difference between having them, apart from my previous experience with the police, was so different.
Yeah.
Also, like things that I wish I had known was basically after you give your statement, you don't really hear a lot, and
Yeah.
you're wondering what's going on. And it caused a lot of anxiety. So,
Yeah.
looking back now, I wish that I had known that it wasn't that I wasn't going to be contacted quite a lot until I needed to be.
Yeah.
And you want updates, and you're you're worried. But coming to a place of acceptance, probably halfway through my case, I realized, okay, I need to relax a little bit. They will contact me
Well, it's out of
when they
your
need
hands.
something.
It's out of your hands.
Yeah,
Once you hand
yeah,
it over, like you literally, and probably this is what I can add from my perspective, is once you hand it over to that detective, it's out of your hands. Literally, you have no control over what happens next. But what you can do, and what you could have done, was sent an email now and again. Hey, how are we going? Do you need anything more from me? Hopefully, I always say this to people: you are allowed to contact your detective. You're allowed to talk to them. You're
yeah,
allowed to ask questions, because it does take a long time.
yeah. No, my detective was really great. She never got annoyed with me when I contacted her or anything like that. And
No,
I
they
was
shouldn't.
saying, yeah, in my email that I actually had, direct contact with the DPP. They put me in this pilot program, which fast tracked the court experience, and they would just ring me directly for updates. And then they'd bring my detective, so they'd make two phone calls, which I found out wasn't usually the norm.
Oh,
Usually they said they would only contact the detective, and then that information will be passed on to me. So I mean that was good as well because I was able to ask a lot of the legal questions
yeah.
when they did contact me. Yeah, I guess having the supports in place as well, like don't bother trying to talk to people who are clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Find those people that aren't are comfortable with it and
Yeah.
use them as your support network. I had a lot of people who just didn't know what to say, and
Yeah.
I didn't feel comfortable talking to them after that. And I learned very, very quickly who I could use as a support.
Yeah. A lot of people are still really uncomfortable in this space. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to support people. Some people aren't ready to support you. So you really don't trust the ones that don't give you that respect straight up, because they're not going to be the people that you need in your corner anyway.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Well, I've just got one
Um,
last question. So the question I ask all of my interviewees is that, I always thought when I was writing my book and when I was, going through the process of leaving the police, that if parents knew what I knew, they would do things differently. And that's what I want to ask you. If what would you like parents to know so that they do things differently for their own kids?
to trust your child. I remember when I was 8, and I don't think I had been groomed to the extent um where I was so scared to say something. I was saying to my mom, I do not like this man.
Yeah.
Um, I hate him. I don't want him in my life. And, she was just like, oh, you'll get over it. You're kind of just jealous because you've got to share me and, you're taking me attention.
Right.
But in reality, I was just too scared to say I'm being abused. The only way I could express it as an 8-year-old is I hate this man. I do not want him to live with us. Um, and that was the only way that I could do it. And I wasn't listened to. I was told just to learn to get along with him. So that's something that I do with my children now. If they tell me that they don't like someone,
Yeah.
I listen to them.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that. And even if it's not because, they're going to be sexually abused, whatever the reason is that they're saying it, they don't feel comfortable, something in their guts telling them they don't like that person. And I definitely try to respect that.
Yeah, well, we talk about, and I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but protective behaviors. And one of the protective behaviors is early warning signs. And early warning signs are, whatever you feel in your body that makes you feel uncomfortable or unsafe. And it sounds like your early warning signs were telling you to talk to someone, like you wanted someone to do something about your abuse, but you didn't have the language or the trust there in your mum to be able to share it. So, that was the best you could do. And we do have to listen to our early warning signs as parents and our children. We need to give them the space to be able to go, or the trust in us that we will do something about it when they feel unsafe. So you're doing a perfect job in that.
Yeah, and then the other thing I do with my own children now is they know how to say their body parts,
Yeah.
because a big reason why I didn't tell an adult is, I was so embarrassed.
Yeah.
It took me till when I started doing my nursing degree to actually be able to say, vagina. And I had to practice. I remember being like, 22, and I had to practice saying it until I became comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Now I don't have an issue, but, that would have really helped me.
Yeah.
Really helped me as a child.
Yeah.
But
And you would have had the language skills and the trust in people to be able to say that if those things had been taught to you at a young age.
yeah, I had no protective behaviors taught to me. So
Yeah.
definitely, all the parents out there, it's something to educate yourself on and learn. And if you're uncomfortable with it, do what you need to do to find a way to become comfortable with it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Imogen, for being on the podcast and for sharing your story. And there's so many brilliant things that you shared in this podcast today. And I am so proud of you. I think you're an amazing advocate. I'm just so in awe of your ingenuity. How ingenious you were as an 8-year-old and how you wrote those diaries and you wrote things that you created a code. And the thing is that you even though you didn't realize that you were fighting for yourself from a very young age. And I think that's something that we forget, that we are actually very good at fighting for ourselves, and you've been fighting for yourself for a long time. So I think you're an amazing parent. I think you're an amazing advocate, and keep sharing your story and keep helping, because I think, and I hope that other survivors who maybe haven't come forward yet might find some solace and peace in knowing that you were successful in everything you did. They don't have to have the diaries. They don't have to have all that stuff.
I want to add.
Yeah, they don't.
That's what I was
can
just going to
still
say. I just need to add, they don't have to have.
Yeah. I mean,
the detectives are very clever. Even most of the stuff that they brought up, they did their job. They can find evidence.
That's right. Yeah. Well, that's if a detective's doing their job properly, they're going to look at every rabbit down every hole. They're going to turn every rock over. They're going to do as much as they can to get a conviction, or to prove what you've told them. And unfortunately, a lot of the time that because of the insidious nature of these offences, there's not always a lot of evidence, because it happens behind closed doors when no one's around. But if you don't try, you don't know. So
yeah, exactly. Well, anyway, thank you for having me. I'm very, very happy that you would agree to have me on here, because I definitely want to start sharing my story. And yes, I'm going to turn those journals into a book. So
well, we'll talk more after.
Let you know when that happens.
Well, I'm a self-published author myself, so I can help you. I can definitely talk you through the process. So we'll keep talking. Thank you so much, Imogen.
That would be great.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. Education empowers children and it empowers parents, and education prevents abuse. That is why I'm here, and that is why you are here. So thank you. If you want any further information or support, follow me on social media, either under Kristi McVie or Cape AU social media accounts. I'll put the links in the show notes. You can also purchase a signed copy of my book, Operation Kid Safe, via the website at www.cape-au.com. Also on my website is a free ebook titled 10 Tips to Keep Your Kids Safe from Abuse, and self-paced courses for parents to help you in your journey of child abuse prevention. Don't forget to join our free Facebook group called Operation Kid Safe Parenting Group. Please see the show notes for any extra information, links and help should you be looking for extra support. Thank you once again for giving a shit about preventing child sexual abuse. See you next time.